Super short video, pre-algebra students. Just going to talk about the test on Thursday. It's going to be short test, almost like a half test for you on Thursday for pre-algebra. Really going to look at one thing, solving equations. It's what we've been working on. Just going to give you lots of different equations to solve. I would love for you to have any script books that you need to have ready for the test. Looking at absolute value, and then one and two step equations, and then multi-step equations. So really that's it. How do we work from multiple step equations? How do we work from some equation that we're given to an answer, absolute value? We'll write that in there. So take a look at your old quizzes, take a look at your old classwork. I'll do an example of absolute value. I'll do a couple examples there, and I'll do a couple examples of multi-step equations. So absolute value, or multi-step equations, we'll start with something like that. X plus 5 equals 10. Pretty simple one-step equation. Subtract 5 from both sides. Get x is equal to 5. A little bit tougher, 3 times x minus 2 plus 2x is equal to 8. Distribute the 3x minus 6 plus 2x equals 8. Collect like terms, 5x minus 6 is equal to 8. Add 6 to both sides, 5x is equal to 14. Divide by 5, x is equal to 14/5. So here's a one-step, here's a multi-step equation, folding in those properties that we've been working on. Little bit tougher, it could be something like 1/2 times 3x minus 8 plus 2/3 x minus 5/4, and then let's say that equals 7/12. Okay, so very ugly equation. Start by distributing the half. 3/2 x minus 4 plus 2/3 x minus 5/4 equals 7/12. Ask yourself, what is the largest denominator, or what is the lowest common denominator? You can do this in multiple steps, or you can do this in one step. If you find the lowest common denominator, and that's the smallest number, 2, 3, 4, and 12 all go into. So really, you take your largest number, 12, and you start just increasing it by 12 each time, and pick the number they all go into. Does 2 go into 3, does 2 go into 12? Does 3 go into 12? Does 4 go into 12? And the answer is yes. So 12 is our lowest common denominator. So we start this problem after distributing by multiplying everything by 12. And once we multiply everything by 12, we want to then collect like terms. So I'm just multiplying everything by 12 right now, and then I'm going to simplify all of this, 7/12 times 12. Alright, so coming in here with a different color. So here, 2 goes into 12 6 times, and I'm left with 18x. Here, there's nothing to simplify, and I get 48. 3 goes into 12 4 times, and I'm left with 8x. 4 times 2 times x. 4 goes into 12 3 times, and I'm left with minus 15. And then lastly, 12 goes into 12 once, and I'm left with a 7. So at this point, by collecting like terms, I get 26x minus 63 equals 7. Then I add 63 to both sides, and I get 26x equals 70. Then I divide everything by 26. And there I have my answer for x. X is equal to 70/26. Now, like we talked about in class the other day, recognizing 70 and 26 as both even numbers, I know I can divide both by 2 and get a 35/13. So that's about as hard as it can get. And I'm not going to lie and say that that's easy, But it is simpler if you know how to multiply by the lowest common denominator to clear all those fractions out. Lastly, let's look at two different absolute value equations. One that's a little bit simpler, 3x minus 2, absolute value equals 8. And then one's a little more complicated, 3 times the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 8. Everything here has to deal with where the absolute value signs are. So on the left-hand side, the absolute value bars are already by themselves. Like one way of reading this equation is that the absolute value of something equals 8. Now that thing, whatever it may be, we can just say, oh, whatever that thing is, it's equal to 8 or it's equal to negative 8. And now we just take what was ever inside those absolute value bars, 3x minus 2, set it equal to 8 and solve, so that's 3x equals 10, or x equals 10 thirds. Or over here, that's 3x minus 2 is equal to negative 8. Add 2 to both sides, 3x equals negative 6, and x is equal to negative 2, and we have our two answers. The one on the right-hand side is a little more complicated because notice the absolute value bars aren't by themselves. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 2 to both sides and get 10. Then I'm going to divide by 3 and I'm going to get the absolute value of x equals 10 thirds. And then I'm going to take what's inside here and set it equal to the opposite of 10 thirds or 10 thirds. Now you might notice that one of these equations or one of these answers is the same. And that's because there is a principle of just dropping the absolute value bars and solving, and that gives you the positive one. Where it gets tough is you can't just take the opposite of this answer and say it's going to work over here. So it's all about when you write these two equations based on the definition of absolute value. And you always write them at the same time. Students just have a hard time. You write them when you get the absolute value of something by itself. Notice we didn't get the absolute value of something by itself until here, and that's when we split it up. All right, we're studying for our test. It's going to be on Thursday. Good luck. Peace.